What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update of sorts for Titan Quest II, which released into early access back in August of 2025, and so we are just sort of 1 year past that, and just yesterday, in fact, the game received a major update, bringing it the Spirit Mastery, or class if you will, and given that I hadn't talked about it in a while, it seems like a good place to jump in and go over some of its more recent updates. But I did also want to let people know that the developer via a PR company reached out to me and asked if I wanted to check out this update and provided some save files for me to do that, to jump into the latest act and everything that they had released, I believe like a month or two ago actually. So keep that in mind as we are moving through here. This character is not one that I leveled up personally, but otherwise let's go ahead and dive into this. So I had not taken a look at this game properly since basically its first major update, which introduced Chapter 2, which gave us a new area to explore, enemies to fight, the usual stuff. But since then, which was back in, I believe, September of 2025, give or take, there's been another like 4 or 5 major updates, so we're going to talk about that, the new Spirit Mastery, the new area that we can explore, but I do want to lead this video with basically the 2 things that I don't exactly love about this currently, that I hope the game continues to work on as it moves towards its 1.0 release, and that is basically that the movement or the speed of the game as a whole is very on the slow side, and it's possible if you like build into like a movement speed build or something, that gets alleviated a bit, but it really just does feel like most of the baseline characters are just trudging through very, very slowly. Combat itself tends to not exactly be very fast-paced. They tend to take a much more deliberate approach there, and that combined with the occasional environmental effect that literally slows you down even farther, the whole thing can feel like a bit of a slow-paced slog, and I do kind of wish they would just speed everything up a little bit. I don't necessarily need it to be speed demon fast, but this is just on the too slow side of things. At the same time, while you are moving pretty slowly, you're probably going to get very acquainted with the relatively similar environments. So the game has a few chapters in it now, the prologue, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a lot of them feel a little too similar in terms of like their actual depictions. Now, you are occasionally in like caves and the like, but much of the actual area that you are traipsing through looks very samey, and it feels like they could just stand to diversify the biomes a little bit. But otherwise, let's go through everything that has been added. So, to kick this off, in November of 2025, the game got its expanded character creation. So, back when I played it, I believe it was just presets, but now you can actually go in and customize your character and everything. And I did notice that this added the ability to copy and import character codes if you want to go for like a specific look and kind of just jump in quickly, as opposed to having to go through character creation every time. If you save that code, you can just input it and be done with it outside of just the presets if you actually want to get in there and customize everything. But otherwise, it's a decent character creator for this. A lot of sliders, a lot of options for various color changes, that kind of thing. More or less what you would expect from a character creator, I suppose. But following on from that, in December, the game got its first truly exciting update, I think, with the addition of the Forge Mastery. Now, the Forge Mastery is kind of neat because it focuses on gadgets as well as defense. Now, the defense side of things is basically just using skills and passives to up your armor and everything and just make you generally harder to kill. But skill-wise, it's got some cool stuff going on because it focuses on like using, again, gadgets and the like you can set down these turrets to help you out. You can summon an automaton, which was actually added in a little after the mastery itself when they kind of expanded all the summoning abilities, but it's an interesting mastery that I think pairs well with other things rather than necessarily being a main mastery, at least what I've gleaned from it. And just if you're unaware, you wind up picking 2 masteries, so it's a combination of this plus another one. Now, this is also the update that they added in relics and charms with. Things like that are something that go into a separate inventory, and if you gather enough of them, you can get these upgraded things to slot into items sort of like gems, which will give you extra effects and give you some customization there. And then, of course, the usual bug fixes you would expect. Now, the third major update brought us Chapter 3, the Arcadian Plains. This introduced all of the centaurs, various enemy factions, the centaurs and the boarmen to be a little more specific, but in adding that new chapter, it of course added new story content, new hub areas, new enemies to fight, new items to gain, that kind of thing. So the area expansion itself was a big deal, just in terms of continuing forward with the story, as well as adding a lot of new content to actually explore and see. But I think the updates following that one in particular are where things actually got pretty noteworthy, starting with major update number 4, which brought the summoning abilities. So while the spirit mastery that was just added kind of focuses in on summoning as a mechanic, prior to that they actually added summoning a little bit of everywhere. They gave multiple masteries access to a summon that they did not previously have. Like the Forge mastery got the automaton, they added like an elemental more or less to like the storm and earth ones. And this is also the update that they started setting about, I would say, balancing things based on feedback and everything, as the other part of major update number 4 was just an incredible amount of balancing and changes to various items. I would say it was a significant rework to a lot of the individual items. That brings us to more recent times, the last couple of months, with major updates 5 and 6. So major update number 5 added chapter 4, the Wildlands, which mercifully does have a little more diversity in terms of environment, even if some of that diversity came in the form of poison swamps that slow you down and poison you and make you go incredibly slow. I'm sure there will be ways around that eventually. It was nice to see a bit of that, but this of course carries on the story, adds again, like the previous chapters, new enemies to fight, items to find, that kind of thing. But major update number 6, literally just yesterday from the time of this video, brought us the new Spirit Mastery as well as the game's crafting system. So the Spirit Mastery is fun in the sense that it adds new mechanics via things like modifiers and whatnot, but also is sort of like the main summoning class in particular. So while they added summoning to a few of the different masteries to give it some synergy, if you wanted to play a pure summoner, Spirit is probably the way you would go. In addition to that, they can also be a caster at the same time. Now, using those save files that were provided to me, I was able to sort of try out a build or two here, and the one I wound up using for most of the recording here, as you can see, was basically me just focusing completely in on the summoning aspect and trying to do as little as I personally could as my actual character, and trying to let the summons handle all of it. But if you wanted to get more involved, you could also, of course, lean into the caster side of Spirit, or combine this with a mastery that just had more physical options, like the Warfare one as an example. But some of the modifiers were really interesting here. So another thing I didn't mention earlier about the Forge Mastery was that a lot of its like gadgets and things work off of these cores that start dropping off of enemies if you're playing that mastery, and then you spend that resource rather than your energy on throwing out your sentries and stuff. Now that's interesting because another thing that's been added here are sustained abilities. So doing things like summoning the automaton here, or some of the summons from the Spirit Mastery, will reserve some of your energy pool, which is a pretty standard mechanic in these types of games. But combining that with a mastery that has like an alternative resource pool for your abilities, the way Forge does with those cores, can make it a little easier to cut pretty deeply into that pool without necessarily completely hamstringing yourself. Now, another interesting thing they did with the Spirit Mastery was this new execution mechanic that I do have to wonder how effective is actually going to be against bosses. But the gist of the execution mechanic is basically that, through abilities and modifiers, your character can instantly kill anything that falls below a certain threshold, the execution threshold. There's a bunch of abilities and stuff that will increase the amount of health an enemy needs to fall below for this to take effect, and if you do it well, you can actually kill a bunch of enemies really quickly by just turning them into instant kills the second they drop below that health pool. But that's obviously going to be much more difficult to do with a boss who's going to have exponentially more health, and so while I don't have an answer right this second, just the existence of that build does kind of make me feel like that in particular might really struggle against a boss unless there's some absurdly broken way to raise the execution threshold so high that it's actually useful against bosses. And then if that's the case, that feels like a meta build waiting to happen. So obviously a little too early to say, I guess, but interesting at the very least. Now the other part of that is the crafting. So the new crafting system is relatively straightforward. Basically you go to a blacksmith, and at the cost of various crafting materials you can try to alter your items a bit. Now it seems like you can increase the sort of like level of the item you found up to yours exactly once, and as you continue to upgrade items more generally, the cost of doing so increases as a way to encourage you to actually go out and find new base items items instead of just trying to roll a perfect item from just a couple that you might run into. I'd be curious if they're going to expand this anymore. Like, it's fine as is. It does pretty much the crafting things you would want, if a little simply the usual adding or re-rolling different affixes onto an item, trying to get the stats and the rolls you want, but seems fine for what it is. Curious, again, if they're going to expand upon that any, but that's basically what the game is looking like these days. And putting all of that together, I would definitely say that you can sort of see the finish line from here. I mean, obviously they're not exactly done, but this was the 0.7 update, I believe, and you can kind of see it all coming together. And while it's not completely done, I do get the impression this will likely be a 2027 release at this point. And between now and whenever that release date actually winds up being, I do hope they make an effort to increase the pace of this game a little bit. It just plays a little too slow for my liking. That's kind of the main thing holding it back for me at the moment. The environments I can live with. That's not exactly a deal breaker for me. And while I am okay with a more deliberate approach to things like combat and everything, I do think you can accomplish that without making the gameplay itself feel like you are a snail moving through molasses. And if they can get that sorted out, I'll be looking forward to the game's full release. But that is basically what is going on with Titan Quest 2 these days, in case you happen to have been wondering. I'm not entirely sure that I'll cover every update between now and release, of course, but when this game releases in full, I will certainly be taking another look at it. But as for today, I think that's pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about this one down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.